Our current culture is not just in this social battle, they're at war with God. Because of that, they're miserable. Suicide, depression, astronomical, historical levels. Why? The further people are away from God, the worse their thinking becomes, the more miserable they become. That is understanding the world biblically. Knowing that, we can now consider, how do I engage biblically? Alistair Begg presents the first option.
The first one that is possible, we might refer to as admonition. Admonition. In other words, to respond to the cultural milieu in which we find ourselves living in a spirit of condemnation. I encountered this when I came to America for the first time in 1972. I won't tell you where the church was, but I went to a church. My hair was rather long, and it didn't fit the framework. Didn't fit my mother's framework either, but that's another question altogether. And after I'd addressed the church, the man said, there you go, folks, look at that. Even someone who looks like that can be a Christian. But it was this same man who introduced me to a phrase that I'd never heard. And that was, he said that apparently America was going to hell in a handbasket. And what was most troubling, though, was that he actually seemed pretty pleased about it.
One way to respond, and this is a temptation as we look at the world and their confusion, is to simply condemn. Are they condemned? Of course they are. Is Alistair Begg suggesting that we never proclaim any sort of judgment or wrongdoing? He's not saying that at all. Instead, what he's getting at is that the church is on a mission to save souls that are at war with God, and by simply scolding, chastising, the best accomplishment from that particular option is that you get a bit of better moral behavior. But what does it profit a culture if everybody stops watching pornography and goes to hell? We're on a mission here.
As I seek to navigate the waters, both as an individual member of society and also as someone who, along with my colleagues, is responsible for the souls and well-being of those under my care, do you realize how quickly your church, my church, can become just an angry place? Where instead of a spirit of mission, there is just a prevailing sense of admonition.
So easy to do this because we see so much wickedness and so much heartbreak and so much devastation that we could be very easily inclined to become sons of thunder.
There's biblical precedent for this kind of approach. The sons of thunder were right along those lines, weren't they? Coming back from the evangelistic venture in Samaria, where the response has not been exactly what you would call fantastic. They said to Jesus, "Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" The kind of reverse altar call approach. And Jesus said, no, that would be a no.
And it should be a no for us also. Make sure we find the line in this, but we must find it indeed. The world is condemned, and we need to let them know that, but not simply for a good old-fashioned scolding. How should you let the world know that they're condemned? Well, I think being very wise in considering how will they hear this, to whom am I speaking, how many people might be eavesdropping. But I want to let people know that they are sinning, that they are in violation of God's law, not so that I can simply chastise or feel better about being controlling of a culture, but instead because I want them to understand that they need a Savior. That is the line when it comes to admonition. However, there's a second way to respond to our current culture, and that would be the method of accommodation.
The second poor alternative is accommodation. And that approach continues in certain quarters, and tragically, not just now in the quarters of that which we would regard as liberalism, but actually in quarters that would now be within the broader framework of evangelicalism. So if our audience is offended by our theology, then we can just switch to psychology. If they don't like the notion that they are guilty, lost, sinful, responsible, and accountable to God, then we can change that a little. After all, we do need a crowd. If propositional truth claims are unwelcome, then we'll just tell stories.
And there we fall into the other ditch. So many churches, so many Christians, so many ministries, they really should be called sonsofthunder.org, because they love to critique, they love to condemn, never pointing people to the reason or the response that can be found in repenting and putting their faith in Jesus Christ, but merely to scold and to chastise and to make this world what it used to be in the 1950s. However, there are many evangelical churches, having seen that perhaps, or for other reasons, they've determined, well, we never want to judge. We don't want to critique. We don't want to be those people who call down fire on culture. We just want to love them. We want them to feel welcome. We want to accommodate them. Both of those responses to our current very sin-sick world are ditches.